Before superheroes ruled the box office, two men were the box office. Sylvester Stallone, the underdog who fought his way from nothing. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the unstoppable machine who conquered Hollywood itself. But what the world didn't know is that behind the cameras a secret war was raging. They shared movie screens, award shows, and even the same women's gossip headlines. But they couldn't share one thing: the title of the biggest action star in the world. This is the untold story of how two legends tried to destroy each other, and ended up changing action movies forever. Before the world knew them as unstoppable killing machines, they were just two hungry outsiders chasing the same impossible dream. Arnold came from Austria, a bodybuilder with a thick accent and an even thicker ambition. Stallone, meanwhile, was fighting his own war, literally broke, rejected by studios, and sleeping in a tiny New York apartment. In the late 70s and early 80s, Hollywood wasn't just making movies, it was building gods. And no one embodied that more than Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone. They were opposites in every sense, the unstoppable force and the unbreakable heart. But in Hollywood, opposites don't stay apart for long, because when two meteors burn this bright, a collision is inevitable. By 1977, both men were at the height of their fame and their rivalry. But one night, it all went public. It was the Golden Globes. Stallone was nominated for Rocky, the film that made him a star. Arnold, meanwhile, was in the audience, watching closely. When Rocky won, Stallone stood up to receive his award, and according to people in the room, he turned and threw a bowl of flowers at Schwarzenegger. The crowd laughed, thinking it was a joke. But Arnold later admitted he really did it. But what's interesting is why Stallone reacted that way. By the early 1980s, Hollywood was changing. The age of cowboys and detectives was over. Now, audiences wanted heroes who looked like they could lift a tank. This was the birth of the action era. Every studio wanted its own muscle-bound savior, its own cinematic god. And right in the center of that arms race stood two men, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone. Arnold had just conquered bodybuilding, 7 Mr. Olympia titles, and turned his image into something mythic. When Conan the Barbarian hit theaters, it wasn't just a fantasy movie, it was the arrival of a new kind of hero. Wordless, invincible, sculpted like marble, built for chaos. He wasn't acting. He was the fantasy. Stallone, on the other hand, had already given the world Rocky, a story about pain, perseverance, and pride. But with First Blood, he reinvented himself. John Rambo was raw emotion with a rifle, a wounded soldier turned symbol of American rage. If Arnold represented the perfect machine, Stallone represented the broken man trying to survive in a world that had forgotten him. And that contrast, perfection versus pain, became the foundation of Hollywood's biggest cinematic duel. Journalists wrote headlines like, "The muscles behind the money," and fans began to pick sides. Were you Team Terminator or Team Rambo? What no one realized then was that this wasn't just competition, it was evolution. Because every punch Stallone threw, every explosion Arnold survived, was shaping what action movies would become for the next 30 years. By the mid-80s, the rivalry had left the gym and moved to the box office. Every new release was a weapon, and every dollar earned was a victory. Stallone had struck first, Rocky III and Rambo. Audiences didn't just watch his movies, they believed in him. He wasn't a superhero. He was proof that pain could turn into power, but Arnold was watching. When the Terminator hit theaters in 1984, it didn't just compete, it changed the rules.
Clothes, your boots, and your motorcycle. Hey. You forgot to say please.
From that moment, every move mattered. If Stallone released Rambo 2, Arnold fired back with Commando. When Stallone trained for Rocky IV, Arnold brought Predator to the jungle. It wasn't just who had bigger muscles, it was who could own the decade. Behind the scenes, studios fanned the flames. Executives would whisper things like, "Arnold's movie made $10 million more," or "Stallone's test screenings are higher." And every whisper added fuel to the fire. The result? A cinematic arms race. Budgets inflated, stunts got wilder, explosions got louder. In the 80s, subtlety was dead. Hollywood was ruled by adrenaline, sweat, and testosterone. And for the fans, it was glorious. Every summer felt like a heavyweight match. Rambo versus Terminator, Rocky versus Predator. People didn't even realize they were watching history being written. A rivalry so intense, it reshaped how Hollywood measured success. By the late 80s, the rivalry wasn't just on screen anymore, it had gone personal. Arnold and Stallone were now global icons, invited to the same parties, premieres, and egos that couldn't fit in the same room. They smiled for the cameras, but behind those smiles were mind games. One of the most legendary stories? Arnold's ultimate prank. According to Stallone himself, Arnold tricked him into starring in what would become one of the worst movies of his career, Stop, or My Mom Will Shoot. Arnold had heard the script was terrible, but when he found out Stallone was interested, he pretended he wanted the role. Word got back to Stallone, and his competitive instinct kicked in immediately. If Arnold wanted it, he would take it first. He did. The movie bombed. And Arnold couldn't stop laughing, but it didn't stop there. They constantly tried to outdo each other, who had the bigger gun, the bigger paycheck, the bigger explosion. Even in press junkets, each subtle comment felt like a jab. Arnold once said, "I don't think of Stallone as competition, unless we're talking about who kills more people on screen." And Stallone fired back, "Arnold uses guns. I use my hands." Fans loved it. The media fed on it. It wasn't just rivalry anymore, it was performance art. Behind the headlines, though, there was something deeper. They needed each other. Without Stallone, Arnold wouldn't have pushed so hard. And without Arnold, Stallone might have stopped climbing. In their own twisted way, the mind games made them both better. By the early 90s, the so-called muscle war had cooled down a little. But Stallone still had one last jab hidden inside one of his most famous movies, Demolition Man. In one scene, there's a throwaway line that fans almost missed. A news anchor announces, "The Arnold Schwarzenegger Presidential Library will be opening soon."
Some newsreels from the Schwarzenegger Library, and that time that you took that car.
Hold it. The Schwarzenegger Library?
Yes, the Schwarzenegger Presidential
In the world of
Library.
Demolition Man, Arnold had become president of the United States. It was meant as a joke, a friendly dig between rivals. But destiny has a funny sense of humor. Just a few years later, in 2003, Arnold actually became a political leader. Hollywood fiction had predicted reality, and suddenly that little joke didn't sound so far-fetched anymore. Even Stallone himself admitted, "Maybe I should have written a scene about me winning an Oscar instead." By the early 90s, both Arnold and Stallone had reached the peak of their individual fame, but the rivalry that had fueled Hollywood's action boom was starting to slow down. Box office battles and magazine covers no longer defined them. It was time for a new kind of collaboration. Enter Planet Hollywood. Alongside Bruce Willis, the two action titans had decided to turn their legendary feud into a business venture. The goal? To create a chain of restaurants celebrating Hollywood, action heroes, and movie culture. The once bitter competitors were now partners, smiling for photos, attending events together, and even sharing the spotlight in a completely different arena. What had been a cold war of muscle had transformed into a strategic alliance.
The Rambo movies and one franchise after the other, and for a while it was like Rocky, Rambo, Rocky, Rambo, Rocky, Rambo.
This period showed the world another side of their story: respect. They realized that their rivalry had made them stronger, more disciplined, and ultimately unforgettable. By joining forces, they weren't just action stars anymore. They were legends shaping Hollywood's legacy together. It was the end of one war, and the start of something bigger: friendship, legacy, and business brilliance. The rivalry between Arnold and Stallone didn't just fill tabloids. It transformed Hollywood. Their battles on and off screen created the template for the modern action hero. Unstoppable, larger than life, and unforgettable. Every punch, every gunfight, every sweat-drenched training session pushed the limits of what audiences expected. Stars like The Rock, Vin Diesel, and Chris Hemsworth openly cite the Arnold vs. Stallone era as their blueprint for success, proving the influence of this epic rivalry still resonates today. Which moment shocked you the most? The muscle arms race, the secret pranks, or their final handshake? Drop your favorite in the comments below. I want to hear your thoughts. If you love diving into the untold stories of Hollywood legends, don't miss the next one. Hit subscribe and tap the bell to join our Scene Hunt community.